Hello, my name is Tracy Hickman, and today I'm going to present to you a short annotated bibliography that I did after some research on the differences between our modern grammar and the grammar of Shakespeare's age or the Elizabethan period. My research was dedicated to finding the similarities and the differences. We all kind of struggle with reading Shakespeare in our classes. So I just kind of wanted to research a little bit about why that is. The first source that I used was called the Shakespearean Grammar. It was written in 1874 by a guy named E.A. Abbott. This was the first attempt to look at the evolution of English from Shakespeare to the modern era. He did a lot of translation and tried to do a lot of one-to-one combination. He encompasses the use of grammar in Shakespeare's writing, while also kind of delving into what words were lost, what words we've gained since then, and how that's changed the parts of speech and the usage of different words. My second source was Shakespeare and the Grammar of Forgiveness, which was written in 2012 by a lady named Sarah Beckwith. Beckwith focuses on the shift in the tone and the meaning of the Shakespearean plays from the first folio to the second folio. From the first folio, we see a lot of vengeance and retribution that we have to get from the main character, from the protagonist against the antagonist. And then in the second folio, we see a lot more virtue signaling. The reason that this is, according to Beckwith, is that England was evolving religiously at the time. And they were going from more of if you were part of the clergy, you told people how to live, to people who weren't part of the clergy deciding for themselves how to live based on the Bible. So the regular everyday person was less virtuous at the beginning of his writing. They were more vengeful because they didn't know what they were supposed to be, really. And then by the end of his writing, they were a lot more like we are today, where they have their morals and that moral compass. And then she shows that through this, Shakespeare starts inventing new words and phrases, and the shift in meaning from his early writing to his later writing in words and phrases starts to happen. And this whole thing is backed historically through the Elizabethan period and the role the church was playing in England at the time. Our next source is a Grammar of Shakespeare's Language, which was written in 2002 by Norman Blake. And Blake is the first guy since Abbott to really dive into the differences between Elizabethan and modern English usage. He shows that words in Shakespeare have multiple meanings. For example, the word for has 12 different meanings. It can be used in 12 different parts of speech in Shakespeare, which is really, really interesting. And it's also confusing for us. It shows a shift from extremely formal language to more informal language over time. A lot of us as teachers, when we teach Shakespeare, we like to say that Shakespeare was for the everyday person. And that's true to an extent later in his career. But earlier in his career, it was very, very formal and by the book. And then another thing Blake does is, instead of trying to translate the full works of Shakespeare, he provides one-to-one translations of words that we may not know. And his translational variation is the basis for the no fear Shakespeare we use today in classes some of us use. My next source was a Grammar of Metaphor from 1970, which is written by Christine Brooke Rose. The Grammar of Metaphor isn't focused specifically on the Elizabethan period, but it touches on it for an extended period of time. It gives a timeline that shows the usage of idioms and metaphors and similes, beginning from Old English and ending in our modern English as of 1970, which is really similar to how we speak today. She makes the connection that A does not always signify B. As teachers, a lot of the times we think everything is a metaphor, and Brooke Rose goes in and says that no, everything's not a metaphor. It's just this use of language that makes us think that this is a metaphor. She says that it can mean B, but it doesn't always have to signify B. Sometimes it's just a plot device to move the plot along, and we read into it too much. And then her work allows us to make connections between the meanings of words over these 4 different eras and how they change and how the words have changed themselves and how we've adapted over time. And then my final source was my favorite source. It was written in 1634. It's called A Short Introduction of Grammar. It was written by a guy named William Lilly in England. And the reason I love this source is it's actually an English to Latin textbook from that era. So it shows us kind of what Shakespeare might have been learning in the classroom and what other students were learning in the classroom. It shows all the parts of speech in both languages, how they work, which is very, very similar between English and Latin. It shows these students from the era how to hone their English speaking and writing skills through the use of Latin, which is where we get a lot of our prescriptive rules. And then it gives firsthand insight into what the students in Shakespeare's era would have been studying, which is kind of what I've been saying. But it allows us to see, oh, this is where this comes from, or that makes sense why we lost that word. And that is the end of my little short annotated bibliography. I had a lot of fun doing this. I hope you all have a lot of fun watching this video. Maybe it's a little informative to you, makes you want to go and research this topic a little more. I know it did me. So thank you so much.